Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of IDTE and UTLF for giving me an opportunity to present and share my experience in teaching principle of chemical engineering. The topic of my presentation is on portfolio workbook as an effective method for student-centered learning of principle of chemical engineering. I am Muhammad Ruel Bilat from University Technology Petronas. Principle of chemical engineering is a core subject in chemical engineering. As you can see here from the building block of the essential knowledge, it is fall under the core discipline. In our university, it is taught for the first year, second semester student. At the same time, they also taking fluid mechanics, and then they take the PC subject after they took physical chemistry. The subject cover three most important topics, which is units and dimensions, followed by the mass balance and the energy balance. In the units and dimension, the student is taught on the basic units and dimension, the system unit as well as the dimension, and particularly to convert the units from one system to another one. In the mass balance, it's basically the application of the conservation of mass, and it covers non-reactive and reactive aspect of the mass balance, as well as single and multi-phase system. While for the energy balance, the subject covers the conservation of the energy. Basically, it's an application of the law of the first law of thermodynamics for the system with reaction and without reaction. From the scope of the subject, you can see that the ground covered by the subject is quite large. So the learning sequence in the delivery of the subject start from a unit and dimension, where we teach fundamental knowledge and understanding on the usage of proper units and dimension. Basically, this concept is required for almost all subjects in chemical engineering. Then mass balance that indicate the quality of the quantity of the mass in and out from the process unit. Teaching mass balance is quite challenging because normally when we do teach this concept, we need to implement it in certain unit operation. For example, mass balance in distillation unit, mass balance in evaporation unit, mass balance in the reaction unit. All of those unit operation is not taught yet for the first year, second semester student. So it make teaching this subject very challenging, and then often we have to cover some of the basic principle of those unit operation. The same thing can be said for the energy balance. All of the implementation of energy balance in unit operation become difficult for students because of they don't understand how the unit operation works. Then I formulated the problem statements. The PC subject caters fundamental concept that bridge science to engineering. What science here is the principle of mass conversion and energy conservation to the engineering. So implementation of this concept into unit operation. It has a multiple facets and has large coverage, including mass conservation, thermodynamics, chemical reaction, and chemical unit operation. It also includes the concept, models, theories, method, and tools of chemistry, and bring them into basic implementation in engineering. Therefore, to be able to effectively deliver the concept to the student, effective delivery and methods or tools for teaching PC is very important to address those challenges. The most important challenge we face is because of the student don't learn the unit operation yet. So often, even probably 20% of the time we use to cater this concept, so that people, a student can follow what actually happening when they have to perform the mass balance and energy balances. The objective of the works can be divided into these four. First is to implement the portfolio workbook as a strategy to enhance learning PCE subjects, to evaluate students' acceptance on the implementation of the workbook, to assess the impact of the workbook on the study output and learning experience, and lastly to gauge a student's satisfaction on the implementation of the workbook. So the method we applied is that the first we prepared the workbook itself. So it consists of the brief summary of the concept and self-exercise pre-prepared before the semester started. It consists of about 170 pages, containing, I think, about or even more than 500 self-exercises and problems. The workbook was distributed on the first week of the semester, and the progress was checked in the middle and the end of the semester. It is assigned to 3% overall coursework marks, and then provided without solution. So the student must then print all of the pages, all of the exercise, and we call their work as a portfolio. They have to solve and write part of the concept that is left blank, handwritten, and must be submitted in person for feedback to the lecturer. Then student perception, acceptance, and opinions on the workbook, on the implementation of the method were gathered at the end of the semester. The survey was conducted after the final mark has announced. To make it brief, this is basically the method. For all of the semester, traditional, so the implementation of the workbook is complemented by the traditional teaching method, when the lecturer teach the basics and the concepts. We also have a class exercise taken from the workbooks, some of the tutorial taken from the workbooks as well, and some of the problems or from the workbook also discussed based on student recommendation. So student will pick which problem related to the concept taught to be discussed in the class. The distribution was in the beginning, and then we have feedback and submission half in the middle of semester and in the end of semester. Then after they obtain their marks, we conducted the survey. So this is how the workbook look like. So basically I'm showing here the chapter 2 here, units and dimensions, not that long. As you see, it's a brief concept. And chapter 3 about process variables and process and variables here. So it's also not that long, but as you can see on the left side here, actually the content is quite heavy in starting from chapter 4 to chapter 8. That's why the total number of pages goes up to 178. These are example of screenshot I got from students' portfolio. So basically, I got this picture from the student asking feedback through WhatsApp groups. So they will send their solution, and I commented as they progress to solve the problems in the workbook. So let's see what is the result of the survey. So the motivation to use the workbook, is it because of the mark or it's because of the workbook is good? So I'm happy here that most of the students, 68%, think that the workbook has a very good materials to support their studies. That's why even though it's without marks, they will still use it. Then when the student asks about how significance of the workbook in helping them to understand the subject, 50% answer the highest, and as you can see here, almost more than 80% give a very high significance, I mean above 4, on the significance of the workbook in helping them understand the subject. On the marking, so Here I implemented mark as the way to enforce the student to work on the workbook, and then more than half of them agree to put mark on it, because from the feedback I find out that it's motivate them to work harder on it, and to complete it, because it's not that easy to go and do exercise of 170 plus pages. And probably the most telling result on the effective and good implementation of the workbook is from this survey. So I asked students to rate how strong would you recommend the application of the workbook for learning in another subjects, and then 50% of them answer high, the highest, close to 80% answer above 4. So basically it is so good as such that the student want it to be implemented for another subject as well. So these are some of the open comment from the student, very positive, but some from this open comment I can see some of the improvement that can be done to enhance the method. Really helpful, helping to get a mark and so on. But I don't want to highlight the positive, maybe you can read it, but there are few of the less positive, like for example the usage of workbook burden student, they have no time to do extra works. Okay, this is probably an important comment, because too many pages, it doesn't really help student, because at the same time they're also taking another subjects. Maybe they perform well in the PC subject but perform less on another subject because of the time they have to allocate it to work on their workbooks. Another good recommendation is to add more notes, so it's complete as a revision material. The current workbook is very brief on the concept. The idea is that the detail of the concept will be taught during the class, so that people so that the student can add an extra note in the workbook. But some students, okay, prefer that it is more complete. So there is a plus and minus aspect of this one. So in conclusion, I can say that the portfolio workbook is an effective tool to promote student-centered learning in principle of chemical engineering subject. Imposing mark on the workbook to enhance, it is preferable to impose mark on the workbook, so that will enhance the student motivation to work on it. The method help the student to master the subject, where the 82% answer strongly agree with this statement. It's also recommended, the method is so good that it is recommended to be implemented for the other subjects, in which more than 85% of students strongly agree with this one. Lastly, it is suggested to provide short answer as well as more intense scaffolding to help the student along the semester in working on their portfolio. Some of the final insight I want to share here. Teaching with workbook, a ready-made workbook, is very enjoyable, but the true pain is in the preparation. So we have to prepare those exercise, write it down all of the basic principles in a correct sequence according to the syllabus. Takes time, okay, but however it's a good approach to especially to help below average students. So we basically by assigning mark, it forces them to work on the workbook, and by just doing so it's already give them good mark, coursework mark. It also facilitates close engagements between the lecturer and the students, because of at least the lecturer will meet with each of the students twice in the semester, while they have to hand in their portfolio and discuss if they have any problems. Lastly, it demands full dedication, especially the time. We have to be ready as a lecturer to give feedback over the entire semester, through any platform. For example, I often use a WhatsApp group so that all of the students can follow what is actually happening. Lastly, it is worth it. So as you can see here, this is from my student in this batch that already doing internship now. Now he is in 4th year, still asking me to send him the workbook because he thinks that it's very useful for his work in the company. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge the student during the semester. They were really the one who worked hard in studying and working on their workbook. So this is a picture I took during my engagement and face-to-face discussion with students. Thank you.